Welcome to the Gynarchy Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Kirti Patel. Here we place women's health and feminism front and center where they belong, engaging in conversations that range from the fundamental to the fearless. With insights from expert guests, we aim to break through the barriers of the patriarchy and envision a new world led by the Gynarchy. So let's get started and dive right in. My guest today is Dr. Holly Wood. Dr. Holly Wood is a licensed marriage and family therapist and ASEX certified sex therapist specializing in sexual wellness, trauma recovery, and relationships. Known as the Hollywood sexologist, she is passionate about making conversations around sex, intimacy, and mental health approachable and shame-free. Beyond the therapy room, she is also an educator, speaker, and content creator dedicated to reducing stigma and bringing evidence-based, compassionate dialogue about sexuality to wider audiences. Welcome, Holly.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, I'm going to start with the obvious question that you get all the time, which is that really a real name?
Yes, that is my real name. I'm actually, now that I'm married, it's Wood-Ramirez, but I still practice with my maiden name, which is Wood. So yes. So if you look up my license, you'll see a -Ramirez, but that is me.
Okay, but it's so great. I mean, and you live in California, right?
I do. I used to live in LA. Now I'm in South Orange County, but yes, I'm in
And you
California.
even got the look, like Hollywood glamour going on.
Trying to keep up
Love
with
it.
you.
I love it. Love it. So, okay, could you just share with us how you came on, this path of practicing, your practice, like what you're doing? Like
Yeah,
share
absolutely.
a little bit about your background and how you came to be doing what you're doing.
Yeah. So primarily, so I'll tell you where I'm at now and I'll take a step back. So primarily my private sex therapy practice focuses on the intersection of sex and trauma. So when I started out undergrad, I wanted to do, I was pre-med, I wanted to do surgery. And then I think six
Hmm.
chemistry classes in, I was like, okay, the doctor never pulls out the periodic table. Why are we still doing this? And I started taking gender and sexuality as a breadth requirement. And I was like, oh, I really like this stuff. On top of that, going through some personal experiences in which I had to deal with violation of my own boundaries sexually.
Hmm.
On I had some personal experiences, and then I started volunteering doing rape crisis work at my local
Oh,
rape crisis center. So I would show up to hospitals after somebody reported a sexual assault and would be an advocate for folks there getting a SART exam or what's sometimes known as a rape kit. I was doing that. And then the third piece of it, so I was in undergrad taking these classes, doing the rape crisis work and working. And in order to have a second job, I was working like retail during the daytime. In order to have a second job, I needed a job that was open overnight. So I started moonlighting at the adult toy store. And so that's what
wow.
I call like my first taste of couples therapy, where couples would come in and usually, it's like a cis straight couple, and the husband would be like, oh, like, my wife needs blah, blah, blah. And I'll be like, okay, well, why don't you go stand over there? And then I'm going to take a moment with your wife and we're going to spend some time together just to see if and what she really does want. And if we want you, we'll bring you back into the conversation. So helping, women to feel comfortable and helping work with couples in that way. I call it like my first taste of couples therapy. So full circle. I knew I wanted to be a therapist helping sexual assault survivors. And I also really enjoyed working at the adult toy store, which was what I called like the fun stuff. And so I was like, when do survivors get to focus on the fun stuff and engaging in pleasure again? So that's kind of how I do. I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. I want to work in helping people who've been through trauma also engage in healthy, consensual, fun, pleasurable sexual experiences again.
That's wonderful. I mean, one of the reasons I selected this episode to talk to you is because as a gynecologist, you can imagine I hear all kinds of horror stories. Okay.
Mhm.
Thanks for sharing that you also have your own, bad experience that inspired you. But I hear all kinds of things in dating relationships, long-term relationships, and it's pretty frustrating for me, and I thought it would be good for us to just for everyone to just learn about, what constitutes a healthy relationship. I see so many toxic relationships and can they be healed, So I have
Mhm.
a lot of questions about that. Another problem that, I mean, I wish you lived near me. There's just such a shortage,
hmm
of therapists right now. So it's really hard to even get help for people. So if anyone out there is interested, please, we need more people in this field. So I guess let's start with like, how do you define a healthy relationship, or what are some, things that you teach? I figured this would be a good topic for women just beginning dating, girls and women, but also
hmm
women who've had maybe bad relationships.
hmm Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, a healthy relationship is one in which both partners feel safe, seen, and supported. At the end of the day, I think everybody wants to feel emotionally safe and wants to feel validated. And so a healthy relationship means that there's emotional safety, there's mutual respect, and also a curiosity about the other person's inner world and an ability to work on things and repair when things go wrong. So every relationship is going to have disagreements or even arguments, but when that happens, are both of you willing to take a step back, to be open, to be vulnerable, to be accountable, and to work together to grow and repair? And so, yeah, safe, seen, and supported is what I think of when I think of a healthy relationship.
So, like, are there certain like green flags you'd look for, or are there certain, yeah, like green flags or red flags? Like, how
Mm-hmm.
does a person out there in the dating world now,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
figure that out?
I think green flags, I think, are going to be accountability. Like if someone's able to take responsibility of people, we unintentionally hurt each other's feelings, especially when we're starting out dating. You don't know somebody, you're getting to know them, so you might learn something and realize that you unintentionally hurt their feelings. So is that person, is whomever hurt your feelings, are they taking accountability and are they making a change, right? Once they learn that this is an issue, are they also not just, apologizing and taking accountability, but are they making steps to change that behavior so that they're not continuing to hurt your feelings? Right? Conflict is normal. Like I said, everybody gets in relation or in disagreements and arguments, but disrespect isn't. So a red flag would be disrespect. A healthy relationship can hold disagreement, but not with the disrespect. And so if you're noticing that your needs are consistently being minimized, or you're being invalidated, or you feel like you are walking on eggshells to try and keep the peace, then those might be reasons to pause and take a look at the relationship and see if this is working for you. And I often tell my clients, if they're in a constant state of anxiety rather than safety, maybe it's worth pausing and examining what's happening.
Is there like a point where you would tell somebody draw the line? Like, like say someone has, crossed the line and then they've reestablished a boundary and they've done it again.
Mhm.
Like, is that when you ask them to just, well, this person's not changing? Like, how many chances does a person get?
Yeah. Like would I tell a client that? Like what would I tell a client? Is that what you're
Yeah,
asking?
what would you, because I see women just getting in this like cycle and it's almost
hmm
like they're trapped.
hmm hmm Yeah. So I try to refrain from telling someone exactly what to do, and in part because I want them to be empowered to make their own decision. But my job is to really get them to look at it from all angles, right? So I might say something, and this is like something, if anybody listening can ask themselves if they're experiencing this constant feeling of anxiety, or their partner keeps hurting their feelings and isn't making changes, and they feel like they're caught in that cycle. I might ask, what would you say if your best friend's boyfriend was treating them this way? Or how would you feel if your sister was being treated this way. And a lot of times, because we as women are socialized to care for and think for others, if we put it in the perspective of thinking about like my very best friend or my sister or my mom, and you're able to say, well, yeah, I wouldn't want my sister to be treated that way, then I might ask them, why are you continuing to tolerate being treated this way?
That's amazing. I love that. I love that tip because I agree. I've seen that myself. Like I think that when you reframe it like that, like they would never allow, women will just never allow mistreatment of their friend, their daughter, their mom, their sister, but
Mm-hmm.
themselves they tolerate quite a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we have been conditioned to feel like undeserving.
Mm-hmm.
So, so what are some things that like are absolute red flags that, someone should think about immediately, like reevaluating the relationship and stepping back?
I mean, of course, first things first, any type of physical violence, any type of sexual violence, or pushing on those physical sexual boundaries, huge red flag. If there is manipulation, that's a huge red flag. If you feel like somebody is minimizing your emotions or invalidating your emotions, right? I always say like everybody's emotions are valid doesn't mean your behavior is valid. Just because you're
Mhm.
hurt doesn't give you the right to act out or to be rude, mean, aggressive to somebody. But the feelings are valid even if your partner doesn't necessarily agree, or if you feel like you're constantly in a cycle disrespecting each other, right? Like there's no need to name call or to weaponize people's vulnerabilities against you. That's the thing too, right? Emotional safety is being able to be vulnerable enough to share those deepest parts of yourself with somebody. And so if you share those and then the person you share them with weaponizes them against you, that's a huge red flag.
Barring something dangerous, obviously like abusive. What's your opinion about like relationships that have broken down a little bit? Like, can every relationship be healed?
Can every relationship be healed?
I'm asking you really tough
Mm-hmm.
questions. I don't
It's a
know.
really
I don't
tough
know.
question.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think for relationships to be healed, it takes both parties willing to do the work to make things better. And for some people, it makes more sense to separate or break up because it's I don't think everybody is meant to be together, right? Which is a hard
Mm-hmm.
thing to say as a therapist. And like, I believe in love, and I certainly believe that relationships can be worked on, especially again, if both people are willing to do the work. But if you're caught up in a cycle in which you're continuing to fight, for example, like I think about people who are married and have kids, and
Right.
sometimes if they're at the point where they feel like they're staying together for the kids,
Mm-hmm.
well, we know that research shows that kids actually grow up better when they have two parents who are happy, whether or not they're married. And so if you're staying married for the kids, but you're continuing to fight in front of the kids, you're exposing them to poor relationship dynamics, poor communication patterns, then that's really not the best choice.
I mean, I think that is probably a big contributor to people staying together a very long time, even in bad situations, is yeah, when you have a family, when you have little, especially the small children.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are the biggest problems you see in relationships?
I mean, it always comes down to communication, right? So I'm a sex therapist, so sometimes people think that I only talk about sex, but so much of the work that I do starts way before people get into the bedrooms, right? Because if you're having issues communicating about the day-to-day things that are happening in your lives, right? Like what to do with the kids or how to go about household chores and things like that. If you can't talk about those things, how can you possibly talk about sex and feel safe in that space? So the biggest thing, it always comes back to communication. And a lot of times, what I see showing up is resentment in couples. And that's usually from unmet expectations or unspoken
Mm-hmm.
expectations, just like assuming this is what was going to happen, this is how the relationship was going to go. And then come to find out nobody talked about it. So they're just in this place of feeling resentful to one another or communicating in a way of like right fighting, like who wants to be right as opposed to actually being heard. Those tend to be the biggest things that
Mm.
I see in couples.
So, how do you improve communication?
So I operate using kind of mixed methods as a therapist, right? I use a mix of Gottman style therapy and emotionally focused therapy. So really getting at the heart of things. So when I'm working with couples, what I like to do is see what the pattern is that they get into. So every couple tends to get into some sort of negative cycle in which they communicate and it's not helpful to them. And so I like to look at an example of the cycle and see what happens, right? When one partner is stressed out, they start to shut down, and then their other partner sees them shut down, doesn't realize that they're actually stressed and emotional, and just sees their partner pulling away. And then that partner feels hurt, and that partner's pushing to get close to that partner, which then further pushes the other person away, right? So
Mm.
I take a look at that pattern and then work with both of them to slow down. Because usually, when these negative patterns pop up, it's when emotions are heightened and we're
Mm.
not able to make rational decisions or respond in a way that we're proud of or are most effective. So, I like to help people slow way, way down, notice the emotions behind their behaviors, and then work with them on self regulation and how to turn towards their partner to support each other through these interactions and then thus develop more helpful patterns for communicating.
So, I'm curious, like, so when a couple comes in, do you observe, like, I'm kind of curious about your sessions. Like, do you just
Mhm.
have them share openly and then just wait to see their dynamic, or do you have them explain their dynamic?
It's a little bit of both. So if a couple signs up for me, what it usually looks like is in the beginning, I do a really big assessment intake just to get an idea of like what they're there for. What are your goals in couples therapy? And also not just the problems, but I really like to look at what are their strengths. I want to know the love story. I want to know how you met. I want to know what attracted
Mm.
you to each other. So I think by the time couples comes to therapy, they're at a place where things are hard, right? They might feel like
Mhm.
they're in dire straits. And so it's nice to kind of go back to, well, what are the reasons that you're together in the first place? Because it becomes so negative or problem saturated that we need to kind of even out the scales with what are all the positive things and all the strengths that you have. And then from there, I like to separate the couple and spend time with each of them individually to see
Mm.
how they show up individually in the relationship dynamic. And then we all come back together and I like to do a treatment plan. And as far as how the cycle goes, I can usually see it from the first phone call, right? The first
Mm.
initial consultation, I might be able to see like who talks first, how do they orient when one partner says, well, this is the problem, or I do this and he does this, right? I can kind of see a little bit of the cycle as it happens.
Mhm.
And so that'll come up. Sometimes I'll be a little bit more like, tell me about the most recent argument you two had. And so they'll play out a recent argument, and then I will name it back to them in a way that's more separating it from them so they can actually see the partner. Oh, so when you do this, you notice he does that. And then is this a pattern that happens regularly? And they'll usually say, yeah, it always comes back like that. So it's a mix of observation and report.
Interesting. So, what about like when one person doesn't want to participate? Is that, I mean, that just sounds hopeless to me, but I guess, I mean, it's pretty common knowledge like men don't like to see doctors and men don't like to see therapists.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I don't know. So I see that, like they don't really, a lot of times just I treat all women, right? So if I hear a
Hmm.
problem, it's, like if I recommend therapy, for example, like they'll say
Hmm.
something like, oh, my husband will never do that. So
Hmm.
it's that's frustrating for women. I mean, I tell them to
Sure.
sign up on their own, but is there
Hmm.
much that can be done?
I mean, no, I mean, not a whole lot, unfortunately. I mean, even in the therapy space, you can only move as fast as your slowest runner, right? So if somebody's willing to show up and to do some work, then that's great. Even if you have a partner who's not necessarily on board, I would talk to them first about explaining why it's important to you, right? So if anybody's listening and their husband's not on board, I might say, explain why it's important to you, right? This marriage is important to me. This relationship is important to me. Our sex life is important to me. Like that's definitely one way to get stereotypical men, signed up is talk about how important your sex life is. So explaining why it's important to you, why you think it would be helpful. And if your partner isn't willing to be open to something that is really, really important to you, I think that's a reason to pause and reflect too. And then also, I think your suggestion is great. Like you can go into individual therapy. Once we get them through the door, or at least on a phone call for a free consultation, then it's my perspective is like, well, you're here. So how do we make the most out of it? How do we get the most out of your investment financially, your time investment? Obviously, something about this is important to you because you're willing to hop on the phone today. And so I kind of try and pull from there. Like they had to have some sort of motivation to even take the consultation call with their wife. Or unfortunately, sometimes I get a consultation from one person and they're like, oh, well, my husband or my wife said I could make the call. And I'm like, okay, well, then even if you're taking the first step kind of solo, if they're on board to show up in the room, I'll kind of lean into what is their motivation for showing up.
Mm-hmm. I know. I mean, unfortunately, sometimes it's, like an ultimatum, like this is over. And then,
Yeah.
then it seems like you're pulling, I would think it's kind of like trying to pull them back from the brink, right?
Hmm.
Um, Something you were saying made me think of, maybe it's easier to get them into now a lot of counseling is done virtually. I was just wondering if you do any of that.
Yeah. So 90% of the work that I do is via telehealth in a like
Oh,
virtual space like Zoom like this. Once in a while I do in person for intensives, and that's if I'm seeing somebody for 3 hours or more in a day, then we'll do that on like a Friday or Saturday. But yeah, most of the time it's virtual. Some folks are pulling away from that. They want to be in person, but a lot of people still appreciate the virtual because then it's less drive time, whereas being stuck in traffic is really nice. It's a lot more accessible for people, which I think is great. And as a sex therapist, it's also really interesting sometimes for me, where I will have couples show up and the place that they could be alone was sitting, just sitting upright in their beds. Everyone's fully clothed, of course, but it's like, oh, like I'm actually getting to see people in this very intimate space, which is really nice.
yeah, I was just thinking like it must be much easier to get people to participate if they can just do it from the comfort of their home.
Yeah.
So, what about like infidelity? Is that something that you feel can be treated? Can
Hmm.
people come back from
Hmm.
that kind of lack
Yeah.
of, that kind of broken trust?
So with infidelity, one of my colleagues, Dr. Tammy Nelson, has a great saying. She says, infidelity can either be a breakdown or a breakthrough. And so it really does let the couple know something in the relationship wasn't working. There are lots of reasons why people engage in infidelity, but above all else, it tells you like something was off in the relationship, and that does give you a chance to repair. Not everybody is able to move forward from that, but I've seen plenty of couples do so. And in fact, it's interesting in my work how many people stay that I
Hmm.
don't think realize that. I think there tends to be a stigma, especially around women who stay with men who have affairs. And that'll come up in sessions in which I'm, speaking to women clients, and they feel like there's nobody else that they can talk to about this. But so many women choose to stay because there's a bigger picture, right? Like you said, they're thinking about not just their relationship with their husbands, they're thinking about their kids, they're thinking about the whole family and their whole lives that they built. And to them, that is more important than this mistake that their partner made or this act of betrayal.
I feel like I see a lot of women who are in abusive situations, and sometimes it's subtle and they don't even recognize it,
Mm.
like. So, I feel like they're being abused in small ways. It's not the big, obvious ways. And so, do you ever encounter that? Like you're talking to a couple and you've heard some of their stories, and then you're like, this is really unfair. Like, I see that a
Hmm.
lot. I'm like, this is really unfair. I wish she would wake up from
Hmm.
this. And, I might put in my 2 cents, but I'm doing medical care.
Right.
So, I guess I'm curious how you approach that. Like, when you see that a woman might be a victim of abuse but doesn't even clock it as that herself.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, when I'm working with a couple in particular, and this is a podcast about women for women, right? So I'll speak in those terms. Let's say I'm with a couple who is a cis heterosexual couple. I, as a woman in the space, often use myself as a mirror for other relationships. And so let's say it's a husband and wife, and the husband says something that might be abusive or is dismissive or he's gaslighting her. I might point out my experience as another woman in the room, right? And I might say
Hmm.
to the wife, oh, like when he just said that, or when you just said that, that really made me feel this way. I'm wondering if
Hmm.
that's your experience. So that way I'm working to empower the woman in the room to share, like, yeah, that was disrespectful, or that was hurtful to me, or I felt however she might have felt in that moment, to point out those dynamics.
Okay, that's great. That's really handy because I do think that isolation is a big part of abuse. Like women are often isolated from their friends and families, and that makes it easier for for the abuser to create this reality. And so it's nice when somebody can kind of break through and kind of point out something that she hasn't
Hmm.
been able to figure out.
Hmm.
So okay, so the other question I had, kind of in this on the same topic, is like, can abusers be healed? Can they, have you seen that?
Yeah, I think everybody has the capacity for change so long as they have like the capacity for empathy, right? So certain
Mm,
folks with psychopathology might not be able to have empathy. But when I think about living in a patriarchal society, I like to ask, in order to bring awareness, like you said, some people don't even realize this, especially like some men don't realize the privileges or the advantages that they have. So I like to ask, who benefits from how this relationship functions? And in
mm,
which way are you benefiting from how this relationship functions, right?
mhm,
Because
mhm,
under these patriarchal conditions, right, mostly women or other marginalized folks are, doing things to provide more advantages for the men, and specifically like cis white men, right?
mhm,
So I like to ask, who is benefiting from this relationship and how it functions or how it is structured, right? So if one person is responsible for all the housework, right? Who is that benefiting, or how is that impacting each of you? I also like to look at how power imbalances are showing up, even if they're showing up more subtly. So it might not be like one person is completely dominating the room, but again, going back to like household labor, if one partner is doing all of the household labor, that means they have a lot less time to do other things, whereas the partner who isn't responsible for the household labor has more time and flexibility to do other things that they either want or need to do. So I'd like to kind of ask those questions just to bring some awareness.
mhm.
There's also, I believe it's called Fair Play, which is they have a book and some cards and some actual research on the
Oh,
breakdown of household labor and chores. And they have like a
oh,
list of like who tends to do which thing, men versus women, and things that take more time. So, for example, traditionally women are doing household tasks like dishes, childcare, vacuuming, dusting, blah blah blah, all that stuff, whereas men tend to do other household chores that are usually on the external portion of the house, right? So that might be mowing the lawn or taking out the trash. But if you break down everything and how much time it takes, for example, dishes are a daily task, at least
right.
once a day type of task, whereas mowing the lawn might be once a week.
Yes,
So
exactly. Good
then
point.
they break it. So when they break it down, and you can see this on, if you Google fair play, I'm sure it'll be one of the top things that comes up. You can see an actual breakdown of these. And I like to show that to people sometimes too. Like, oh, do you realize how, because they, if this is a couple that shows up, well, they're like, I work on the house too. Who mows the lawn or who washes the cars? And I'm like, that's great. Let's take a look at how long that takes.
Okay, so that's a book and also some kind of like something like a workbook or something you can buy as a couple.
Yeah. Yeah. They have a card deck as well. They have a book and they have a card
Oh,
deck.
okay. Okay, great tip. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the big problem right now. They're finding less people are getting married and having families and children like in the past. And I think this really highlights like some of this, the problems of this modern age, which are that men and women do not know how to have a relationship now that women are maybe not doing as many like following this traditional role, that
Hmm.
we all kind of were brainwashed into believing is like the norm, right?
Hmm.
So like how do you help couples navigate that? That must be really hard. I mean,
Hmm.
well, you said this particular kit, right, or tool, this fair play
Hmm.
stuff, but
Yeah.
but yeah, so like
Yeah.
I guess I know it's very individualized with each couple because, it depends on how much each person is working outside the home and what they're doing in the home. But
Hmm.
it just seems like a huge challenge. Do you have thoughts on how this can be repaired? Not just in maybe your room, your counseling room, but just in greater society, like how you'd like to see this improve or what you think it will take.
Oh, you are asking the hard questions. How can we address society? Well, I think again, just going back to that question of who benefits from the way that this relationship is structured, because for some people, right, and for some women, they do want to live that way that is a bit more
Right,
traditional, and that is totally fine, right? My
right.
hope is that my hope is for in larger society that we are critical and we're questioning the scripts that we're grown up with and that we've internalized about how relationships function, or these different gendered scripts about what women do, what men do, etc. And then for relationships, right, I think it's having conversations about how to set up this relationship in a way that is mutually beneficial,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
For example, I do like that my husband can rotate the tires, and that is not a job that I want to take on. I would much rather do the dishes than rotate the tires. But I also don't want to be the sole person responsible for doing the dishes every single day. So, how do we work together to co create a relationship that's not based on these antiquated scripts, but based on what is going to be mutually beneficial?
Yeah, I imagine that includes like putting it on a schedule, right?
Right? Right?
Yeah. How do you guys make it work? Like you both, I assume both working and you have a family,
Yeah.
so
My husband and I, oh goodness, we talk a lot and we are partners. And I think that's a big thing for us. We constantly use the word partner, like you are my partner, he is my partner. And so we very much operate as a team and we communicate a lot about who's doing what that week. And I love for couples to use like a weekly, relationship CEO type of meeting where you sit on the weekend and you go, okay, what went good this week? What are we going to focus on next week? Not just as far as logistics, like who's going to pick up the kids from school, but also emotionally, how can we emotionally connect? And so a lot of it is scheduling, right? There are certain days where my workload is easier. And so those are the days when I cook dinner. And there are certain days when his workload is easier. So that's the day that he cooks dinner. Or, for example, today is the day where my husband is home and he's taking care of our two young children while I'm working. And so it's just really a lot of working together to see what's going to benefit the whole family.
the other thing is just long-term relationships are a challenge, right? People are not always growing together.
Hmm.
So, like, do you have thoughts on that? Tips about that? How to keep it alive and you're engaged with your partner over time? And a lot of
Hmm.
stresses like family stress and kids and
Hmm.
work and all that.
Yeah. So, I mean, my number one tip is to build your village, right? Everybody says that it takes a village to raise a family, and it does. And unfortunately, now most of the time it costs money to have a village through childcare. And so that might be part of it. But building your village, we have really great friends that are our kids' godparents that luckily live close enough to us that we are privileged that we can have a date night once in a while and be able to get back to dating and not give that up. So I think that's super helpful, continuing to date, continuing to learn and grow together, and then continuing to make sure that you're aligned in terms of values. That's the biggest thing that I see with couples, especially when they're dating, right? I'm like looking at values. What are your values? Because that's what's going to take you long term. What the fact that you two like to eat together is you try new restaurants is like great, like that's cool, but what are your values? Because that's what's going to take you long term. Yeah, and just growing together. We like to learn new things. Learning new things keeps it fresh, and prioritizing our relationship beyond the kids, right? So we have two grown kids and two very small children. And I think where I see a lot of couples fall into this roommate rut is when the children take priority over everything,
Mm.
excuse me. And there are going to be times when you have to prioritize your children, and when there are times when you should certainly prioritize your children. But what I like to remind people is ideally, as parents, if we do our job well, eventually the kids leave the nest and then we're stuck back with our spouse again. And so if you don't focus on the relationship and prioritize that relationship beyond the kids, you're going to have nothing in common anymore. So that's like my number one tip, is to make sure that that relationship continues to be the priority.
Yeah, and that just reminds me of like something else I've heard, just like people's parenting styles can be really different, and that can be a
Mm-hmm.
source of conflict, another thing to fight about, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I see in my practice as a gynecologist is just, you know, as women get older, sometimes there's less, lower libido, less interest in sex. And I guess, can you speak to the importance of that in a relationship? Or, how important is it? Because a lot of women will even say, you know what, I'm good if I never do it again.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm
Yeah.
like, is this something to treat or not treat, So,
So I think that goes back to values again, right? Every people have different priorities or different things that they value. And some people place sex as having higher value in a relationship than other people. I think too, especially for women, the biggest thing that I see as far as like low desire in women, and even I hesitate saying low desire because I'm like, I don't want to say like low versus high desire partner, but
right, right.
I,
It's
a
just a
lot of times the way that
mismatch.
Right, right. A lot of
Right.
times the way that we look at desire is we look at it the way that we see in movies, where people just want to like jump their partner's bones, or they're just like so sexually attracted. You feel this like feeling of horniness right away. And we know that to be spontaneous desire. And men tend to align more with this idea of spontaneous desire than women. For women, it tends to be a bit more complicated, though it can be either gender. Anybody in the gender spectrum can have these different types of experiences of desire. But for women, desire tends to be more responsive, meaning that it needs to respond to a stimulus, because sex is better understood as an incentive motivation system as opposed to a drive, right? This term sex drive, I hate that term because drive is like a biological drive, like hunger or thirst, where without which you might die. And some people might feel like they would die without sex, but we know that that's not necessarily true. And so when you think about desire as an incentive motivation system, right, what is your incentive? Usually it's that it feels good. And what is your motivation? And so if I encourage people to think about their motivations, is it because you like to see your partner turned on? Is it because it feels good for you? Is it because it's a stress relief? Is it because it's something you can willingly give to your partner for some sort of relationship maintenance? And I think that's okay. Also, I oftentimes think about the lower desire partner. If sex is of higher value to the higher desire partner, is that something that you're okay to do with them? Not forcing yourself to have sex when you don't want to or when it doesn't feel good, right? It's not about that, but it's about this is something else that you might want to do with your partner as relationship maintenance because it makes them happy. I often equate it to Raiders football. If anybody's a Raiders fan, you know how hard it is to be a Raiders fan right now. And so I don't love watching Raiders football on the weekends, but my husband does. For me, it is worth it to sit on the couch and watch Raiders football because it's not hurting me to do so, and it makes my partner happy. And I think sex can sometimes be thought of in that way. If it's not hurting me, it's not causing any issues for me, and it makes my husband happy. And if I do it, I actually end up having a great time. Kind of like
Mm,
football. If I go to a tailgate, I'll have a great time. I just might not be excited to go there. So thinking about those motivations too. But
okay.
your question as far as like, is this something to treat or not? I mean, I would ask them.
Yes, yes. And I do. And I often say like, is this something you guys can come to a compromise on? That's something that both of you can kind of meet each other halfway.
Mhm.
Sometimes in really mismatched couples, that's really hard. And
Mhm.
so that actually leads me to thinking about boundaries. Like, you know,
Mhm.
I've also seen like even among my friend group, just couples that are mismatched personality wise, like where like one is an introvert and one is an extrovert, and like some people don't need any space at all, alone time, and others
Mhm.
do. So yeah, it kind of reminds me of that too, like the sexual boundary, but also just boundary to have your own time and or time with friends or other people outside the
Mhm.
relationship. So that's kind of hard too, right? I think some people take it personally if you don't want to spend 24/7 with them, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I definitely see that, but I think it's important for folks to have some sort of individuation in which they can have their own lives. And I know maybe communicating to the partner who wants to be with you all the time, how absence makes the heart grow fonder. And like if you're able to,
Yes, yes.
you know, have your own individual time or your own time with friends, it actually makes that time that you spend with your spouse or your partner even more valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I just see this so much within women's lives, like there's just no boundaries with a lot of different relationships, and just there's almost like a loss of identity because they're just
Hmm.
mom and wife and caregiver and all of these roles, and they often don't take time for themselves.
It makes you so much of a better partner and mom when you're also filling your own cup. I know, like, I am my best mom. I'm the best version of myself as a mom when I am feeling happy and fulfilled in other aspects of our life. And so I think, it goes back to that, airplane analogy. You have to put your own mask on first. And I think that's hard to kind of rewire in women who are so socialized to care for everybody else first.
Yes, yes. I'm so passionate about that. I often talk about that with patients. It's just, you know, trying to reconnect with themselves. This is where
Mhm.
counseling for yourself might be good. Just they
Exactly.
don't even sometimes know who they are and what
Hmm.
they like because they're always just doing what other people like.
Hmm.
So what other thoughts would you like to share on this topic?
Just on the topic of healthy relationships, I know we've covered a lot today. I feel
Yeah,
like
I think so. Yeah, thank you
um
for your
of
insights.
course. Of course. Yeah, I mean, it's cliche, but yeah, communication is key. And if you find yourself getting stuck, there are therapists out there. There's a reason why we exist. I think some people might feel like therapy is for when things are on the verge of divorce, but that's not necessarily true. I always say, like, it's nice to go and you change your oil or do some like vehicle maintenance before you're stuck on the side of the road somewhere. So know that you don't have to be in dire straits to seek out help. Similarly, like you would perhaps seek out a personal trainer or something like that, right? So to take advantage of the support if and when feels right to you.
I did actually think of another question. I'm not letting you go
Okay.
just yet.
Okay.
Um,
No worries.
so you had mentioned like coming up with a treatment plan. I'm just curious, like what kinds of things could be in this treatment plan?
Yeah. I mean, it really all depends on the couple and what you're looking to focus on. And so I'm assuming you, as a medical provider, have some sort of treatment plan, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
From
And so how
yes.
it works is like, as a therapist, like a therapist treatment plan, it's always like two parts. First half is what are your goals? The second half are the objectives or how I intend to help you get there. And sometimes it's something that's very specific and measurable, like clients will go from having sex 0 times a year to a couple times a year, right? Like if they haven't had sex in a long time. Sometimes it's a little less specific because, like I tell people, we can put numbers on things because it's nice to see things to be measurable. But also, they're going to be the best measuring stick for their success. Maybe their goal is to fight less. Maybe their goal is to have more pleasurable, connected sex. I think about some of the couples on my caseload right now. Sometimes the goal is to even out sexual initiation, right? One person is always initiating and they feel like they're always chasing their partner. So part of their goal is to explore other ways to initiate. One of my couples, it's to spice things up. And so what that might look like is coming up with a sexual menu. I like to think of a menu of different things to engage in sexually, whether that's like foreplay, different ways to engage in intercourse. Maybe there's some like BDM stuff on there, but co-creating a sexual menu that they both enjoy as far as an intervention. Sometimes it's if their goal is to argue less or to develop better skills for conflict resolution, then the intervention for that is we're going to be doing some emotionally focused therapy enactments in which I'm going to help them to see their cycle and help them to change that cycle, like we talked about. And with that, there's a lot of individual work that I'll have them do for their own emotional regulation, right? Because that usually happens when we're in the heat of the moment. So maybe some of that treatment plan is this partner's going to start doing yoga or this partner's going to start going to individual therapy. And sometimes, like just like in a sex therapy treatment plan, if they're having sexual anxiety of any sort, like maybe one partner is having trouble with erections or one partner isn't feeling in their bodies, I'll assign something like sensate focus, which is a specific sex therapy technique. I often like jokingly refer to it as mindfulness with a sexy dress on, but it's like a way of really mindfully engaging in intimate touch with a partner in a container that is low stakes. There's no pressure to orgasm. There's no pressure for penetration, but really relearning and exploring touch and your partner's body.
Okay, thank you for giving me a little taste of the type of
Yeah.
advice you give. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Holly, what is next for you? What are you working on or excited about that you want to share with others? And then also
Yeah.
share where the audience can find you if they want to follow you.
Yeah. So my most exciting project that I have right now is my YouTube channel. So I started a YouTube channel in April of this year. So I'm really excited to be putting out content with real evidence-based information on sex relationships and mental health. So if anybody wants to check that out, they can check that out at youtube.com/the Hollywood Sexologist. And if anybody wants to get in contact with me, they can find my website under the same name, thehollywoodsexologist.com.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank
So
you.
it was really great to talk to you today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated the conversation.
Here's my closing thought for today. In the patriarchy, male dominance and control are prioritized, and this often leads to unequal power dynamics in relationships, with the enforcement of strict gender roles and imbalances in labor. In the Gynarchy, we recognize that healthy relationships require mutual respect, equal partnership, consent, and shared responsibility. So down with the patriarchy and up with the Gynarchy. Thank you so much for listening. I wish you a happy holiday season, and we'll see you sometime in the new year. So if you've enjoyed any of these episodes, please consider leaving us a review on one of the podcast platforms. Thank you so much. Did you enjoy this episode of the Gynarchy podcast? Know someone else who might enjoy this conversation? Make sure to subscribe and share the show with your friends and family. Find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and just about anywhere you find podcasts. On social media, we can be found on Blue Sky, Instagram, and TikTok at The Gynarchy. Thank you so much for listening.